I love punk rock. It was one of the first genres I discovered on my own. Bands like Black Flag, Minor Threat, Reagan Youth, Dead Kennedys, the list goes on. The central theme for a lot of punk rock during its peak in the 1980s was a hatred for Ronald Reagan. See, bands like the aforementioned Reagan Youth and Dead Kennedys made several references to their distaste for President Reagan, with Reagan Youth's name being a direct reference to the Hitler Youth of the 1920s through the mid-1940s, and the Dead Kennedys having several songs mentioning the former president, even reworking their iconic song California Über Alles under the name We've Got a Bigger Problem Now on their EP In God We Trust Inc. To this day, people still discuss what made Ronald Reagan so dislikable within the punk community. Was it because he was everything against the DIY ethos of the bands in the 1980s? Was it because of censorship attempts by groups such as the PMRC in the 80s under his presidency? Was it because of his ideologies, his lack of concern for the poor, his seemingly anti-feminist wife? Or was it because he was a representation of the lie that they believed was the American dream at the time? During my freshman year of college, something interesting happened.
Donald J. Trump is now President of the United States. President Obama.
Reality television star and frequent WWE guest celebrity Donald Trump became President of the United States. I remember sitting in my dorm room, in silence, more surprised than anything else, turning to my old roommate and saying, well, at least we'll get some good punk music out of this. I wasn't the only person questioning if the then possibility of a Trump presidency would bring in a new era of punk rock similar to that of the 1980s. From publications such as The Guardian and Vice to musicians such as Amanda Palmer of the Dresden Dolls claiming that a Trump presidency will, quote, make punk great again. And Vice writer Tony Retman stating, as the 2016 presidential election approaches, it's worth looking back on all this in order to find a silver lining in the prospect of a Donald Trump presidency. Sure, he's a racist, lying, orange-skinned torture enthusiast, but could he lead to a punk rock revolution similar to the one we saw in the early 1980s? In Trump's America, you might have to bury your collection of First Press Danger House singles in your aunt's backyard like it was kiddie porn. But oh, what the fuck?
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
Okay. But there's no question, some great songs would be written about what would be a terrible 4 years for the country. All I know is I'm about to copyright the band names Trump Youth, Trump SS, and millions of dead Trumps. And here we are, going on 3 years of Donald Trump's presidency at the time of this recording. And the most I've seen so far is...
Oh, I am billionaire Donald Trump. My TV ratings will never slump.
And
I am candidate Donald Trump. All the models I'll get you home.
so what happened?
Let's get out there, everybody. Ready? We're doing
The
jump!
problem with some of these Dead Kennedys covers or reworkings is that California Über Alles paints a picture of a future hippie dictatorship under the governor of California and presidential candidate Jerry Brown, and later Ronald Reagan with We Got a Bigger Problem Now. A lot of these Trump-centric re-recordings don't have the same power of the original. Most of them focus on Donald Trump the celebrity with a base understanding of the more controversial of his political ideologies, such as building the wall. They're more upfront with what's wrong with Trump the candidate, whereas the Dead Kennedys were more focused on what could happen if Jerry Brown became president and paint a sarcastic world where the aforementioned way of thinking isn't rebelled against. Not to mention that instead of creating something new and original with our current state, rock music would rather turn to the comfort zone of the past, but that might not be it either. Maybe there's a better perspective being offered out there from somebody else.
Hey!
Donald Trump and hip-hop have had an interesting falling out in the past 4 years or so, from an idol of success and wealth, and being referenced by rappers like Snoop Dogg, Kendrick, P. Diddy, 50 Cent, and Lil Wayne. It was very apparent that these rappers liked his image, not his politics, with the exception of Kanye West, which could be a whole different video in its own. There are many factors that led to hip-hop's dissociation with Donald Trump, such as his dismissal of the Black Lives Matter movement, supported by influential artists such as Kendrick, J. Cole, and Jay-Z, just to name a few. Other factors that led rappers to turning their back on Donald Trump include his comments following the deadly 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, to his battle against NFL players who take a knee during the national anthem to protest racism, started by Colin Kaepernick, a known supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, plus a host of other controversial comments on race and racism in America. And many people feel that some of Donald Trump's policies have a massive negative effect on areas in poverty, which a lot of these artists come from. For example, Kendrick Lamar's 2012 hip-hop masterpiece Good Kid, Mad City chronicles Kendrick's life in Compton, California, and involves subject matter such as economic struggles, gang violence, women who are oppressed, and it sort of gives a perspective on the aforementioned subjects and the effects on him and the people around him. Punk music hasn't gone anywhere. There are many bands still active today, as well as newer ones forming constantly. However, I feel that Donald Trump's comments resounded more within hip-hop culture as opposed to punk culture, in that a lot of the comments Trump made pertaining to Black Lives Matter, the deaths of unarmed African Americans at the hands of police, and police brutality, are things that have been covered by rappers such as Jay-Z, J. Cole, and Kendrick Lamar, Eminem, for years. The 80s were such an iconic time for punk rock. I think that it had its place in Reagan's America, and that it will never be replicated. Why listen to a band try to recreate Dead Kennedy's style when we have current artists talking about things that they have first-hand experience with? While punk acts can discuss and bring to light a lot of the things Donald Trump has made controversial comments about, why wait when we have a revolution happening in front of us? The expectation that all these punk acts had California Uber Alice-esque songs about a Trump presidency is just ridiculous.